What was the treason? What was the treason? Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my Stagey YouTube channel. If you are meeting me for the first time, hello! My name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I have just got back from a concert performance of TREASON the Musical, a new musical which was performed in concert at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. This is part of a series of concerts that have been running alongside the theatre's production of Frozen the Musical here in the West End. It started with Chess, which I went to see earlier this month, which I've already reviewed here on my channel. Go watch that if you haven't already. They then did a concert staging of Kinky Boots. I didn't see that one because I was in Paris at the time, and I have just got back from Edinburgh in time to see TREASON, which I was very excited about. So this is obviously an interesting one against the other two because this is a brand new musical. A concept album has been recorded. I think there was some version of a streamed concert during lockdown. There are a couple of performances teasing this concert at West End Live that I was very intrigued by. Every time that this has been recorded or performed or workshopped, they have assembled a dynamite cast of West End performers and incredible vocalists, and this concert was no exception. So I'm going to tell you all about it now that we have finally seen a full version of the show. Even though it was only semi-staged, we now have a much stronger idea of what this material is like. This is a show that various people, and possibly the show itself, have been considering the British answer to Hamilton. And in today's video, I'm going to explain to you why that is not the case. Check out this clip from the show's curtain call, and then we will start the review. Now, just before I get into the review, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you're subscribed to my Stagey YouTube channel for plenty more reviews coming very soon about all of your favourite musicals and plays. Also, if you really enjoy the video, feel free to give me a super thanks down below. That would very much help me as a Stagey content creator. And as a reminder, if you want to keep up to date with all of the reviews that I write, as well as the video reviews that appear on here, you can go to showscore.com and sign up for your own account. If you use the link down below, then you will automatically be following me, and you can write your own reviews of shows you have seen, including TREASON the Musical. Do it now, thank me later. So this was a 3-star production, and it's because of its material. Now, I will say straight away, I enjoyed the performances. The cast are obviously stellar. You have such amazing people in this production. I am going to talk about some of the performances, but I thought they were all very strong. Primarily, what we're going to focus on today, and the reason this was a 3-star production, nothing to do with the staging even necessarily, or the music, or LMTO, the London Musical Theatre Orchestra that is, or the cast, or the visuals, or the design. It was really just about the material. That is what I was primarily focusing on, because this is a new musical, so you really have to focus on the material. That's what this was about. That's what this was a showcase of. So that is what we are going to discuss. And this was 3-star material. Now, it's a theatricalization of the gunpowder plot and kind of an exploration of that beyond what you might have learned about it in schools. It goes well beyond Guy Fawkes, to the point that Guy Fawkes is not even really a character. He appears briefly. He is an ensemble member in an ostentatious hat, and he does not get a single line where he is heard by himself. He sings in chorus with a couple of the other plotters, but he does not have a single spoken or sung line in the show, at least in this version of the show. I will say I don't know if what we have seen this evening was the full version of the show as it has been written, or if this was a sort of abridged version because it was in concert. I will assume that this was the full version. Before I go into specific details of what I didn't like about this show, I want to talk about the big picture. What you have here is somewhere in the middle of a Venn diagram of Les Mis with this whole revolutionary, epic, fairly sung through, passionate vibe, with Hamilton, where it's historical, but it has this slightly contemporary edge, and it's depicting a historical event from a hitherto unexplored perspective, and it also gives me a little bit of a Prince of Egypt vibe as well. Now, on the Les Mis front, the reason it is not as successful as Les Mis, even though it does some of the same things, is because in Les Mis, the characters sing their feelings. That is the entire success of Les Mis, is they sing their emotions, their outpourings of grief and love and despair and hope, and they perform that. The lyrics are beautiful, the melodies are soaring, they sing their feelings. In Treason, they do not sing their feelings, not nearly enough. They sing about the plot, and it's very close. You could listen to some of these songs and tell me absolutely, yes, they're singing their feelings. Carrie Hope Fletcher's character, Martha Percy, she's absolutely singing about her feelings for her husband, but she is describing events and their consequences more so than she is saying, this is how I feel about the situation. It just doesn't afford them the opportunity to pour out their passions and their feelings, and that is a big issue specifically with the way the show is set up, because you need to know why this persecuted group of Catholics feel so strongly that they need to do what they need to do if you're going to be able to root for them to commit this murderous act. By the way, if you're just finding out now what the gunpowder plot is, I encourage you to go Google, read a book about it. I'm not going to say spoiler alert for the gunpowder plot, it was a very long time ago. But I think it's pivotally important for this story that we understand their perspective and why this is so important to them. I talked about Prince of Egypt before. Now that is where you have another religious group, you have the Hebrews, also hugely persecuted, but you understand their perspective. Why? Because the show opens with deliver us. You hear them speaking directly to their God in prayer and imploring him to make their life better and to deliver them what was promised to them. For a show like Treason is, where religion and that particular denomination is so important to the plot and the characters and their identities, it's surprising that there is conspicuously little prayer, even when sung. One of the best songs in the show, and one of the most known songs in the show at this stage, is a song called Inevitable, where Carrie Hope Fletcher's character essentially sings that is there any point in her praying for something because everything is inevitable? It seems on the face of it like she's actually having this religious crisis, and she's even questioning the existence of a god, which goes entirely against all of their character motivations because they're all staunch Catholics, which is the whole reason that they want to blow up the Houses of Parliament. Now, on the Hamilton front, it just doesn't frame itself as cleverly. I think the beauty of Hamilton and what makes Hamilton work so well in a theatrical setting is Aaron Burr as the narrator, which is not necessarily the obvious choice. And they have tried to do something similarly innovative. It just doesn't work and it feels slightly half-baked. They have this modern narrator character who is present through some of the show, but then very much absent from later parts of the show. Not a through line in the same way that Burr is a constant throughout Hamilton. They kind of come and go as and when they need exposition, but when they decide they don't need as much exposition, then you just don't get the narration, and structurally it kind of changes from what it was at the beginning. Equally, they are there at the beginning of the show, they are not present at the end of the show, and the rule kind of ought to be, if they're going to open the show, they should end the show. My friend Ellie Talks Theatre pointed that out after we saw the show. I thought that was an excellent point, so I am stealing it for this review. Ellie, if you're watching, then credit to you. That was an excellent inference. Also, if you haven't already, go and subscribe to Ellie Talks Theatre on YouTube. There are not many of us theatre YouTubers still making content here on YouTube. Go check out her channel, make sure you're subscribed. She makes excellent content as well that I think you will all enjoy very much. But this contemporary narrator character is definitely not as effective as Aaron Burr is in Hamilton. And I think the way the show is framed, they should lean more into the whole remember the 5th of November gunpowder treason plot. That's kind of the whole basis of what most people in the UK know about the gunpowder plot. Some knowledge goes beyond that, but generally that is what we all retain from schools. In the same way that Hamilton very quickly identifies him as the $10 founding father, because that's, prior to Hamilton, what most people knew him as, because he was not as well known as the other founding fathers. And the same way that Six starts with its divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survives, and ticks off every single, like, Henry VIII wives cliche, I think Treason should lean more into, here is what you already know, now let us teach you everything else. The fact that Guy Fawkes is just randomly mentioned at one point, pops up in a hat, and then says nothing, that's weird. That's weird to me. So I've talked about the framing and the lack of really getting that sense of motivation from the protagonists, not being able to get on board with them. It's never really hammered home why you should be rooting for these characters. They don't seem particularly persecuted. We are told that they are, but the first thing we witness is a wedding between Martha Percy and Thomas Percy, I believe was his name. And they seem very happy, they seem reasonably affluent. Obviously this was a semi-staged production, so there's no sense of scenery or whatever. We can't really tell their level of wealth, but everything seems quite fine. It doesn't seem like they are in a dire or desperate position, except for the fact that that is what we have been told in the narration, but we do not feel it. We are not implored to feel any kind of empathy for their difficult circumstances. So when they then plan a murderous vengeance, we are not entirely on their side. Also, there is very little script or book in this musical. We generally go from song to song, which is fine if there were more sections like a Les Mis or like a Hamilton where you have little song introductions to the song and you have your big moments like an On My Own or like an I Dreamed a Dream, but then alongside that you have the little recitative bits that lead into it. Because On My Own is nothing without its "and now I'm all alone again, nowhere to turn, no one to go to." You need to set up the circumstance of that song rather than just introduction, I sing a song now. There's a lot that we seem to lose in terms of understanding where we are in the plot because we don't have those sections of script. There's a moment where Carrie Hope Fletcher implores Bradley Jaden's character, her husband Thomas Percy, to stop following this other character, to stop believing everything that he says. And Thomas Percy responds that he has such belief in him because he's so convincing. We never get shown that. We never see this third-party character as being this passionate, convincing, inspiring leader. We only ever see him sort of complaining or just singing, "We're going to do a plot, I have a plan, let's blow stuff up," end of Act 1. Like, we don't get those moments where we are convinced of the characteristics of this dude, that he would be able to convince all these guys to follow him. My vocabulary went out the window halfway through that sentence. I apologise. It's 1 a.m. if you weren't sure. But it's basically the same thing I said about Cinderella. The songs, especially in the second act, seem to just start and then end. Not many of them have a good enough button, so there is not a lot of applause. The button is what would go at the end of the song to be like, and now you clap. It's the thing that will indicate and lets an audience, especially a slightly reserved British audience, know that now is the appropriate time to clap. So there were plenty of moments where the song was huge, but it died a sort of a small death and there wasn't a good enough button on the end, so we didn't know to clap. So we didn't clap. Also, what bits of the script there are poetic, and it grates on me. I'm all for something being stylistic, and I don't have an issue with it as such, because if you want that, then that's fine. It began to annoy me. It started to feel like they wrote the show with a rhyming dictionary to hand. When we're talking about the lyrics for these songs, a lot of the choruses are quite repetitive. The end of the first act had a song where they just sang the word blow over and over again, like dozens of times. There's a song in the second act where they sang the word digging dozens of times. For many of the songs in the second act, I started to notice this feature where if they had a particular line or a title or a metaphor that they liked, they would just repeat that over and over and over. There was one about barrels being on the water, and they just kept telling us that these barrels were on the water. I very much got it, even by the third or fourth time they told us the barrels were on the water. I understand where the barrels are. That much I am very clear on by the end of that song. Rather than characterize it as the British Hamilton, there are actually various points where I started to think of it as being closer tonally and structurally to Jekyll and Hyde. Hear me out about this. So it was the character of Martha Percy, this leading lady character, that first alerted me to this, because they have a wedding party at the beginning, same as in Jekyll and Hyde. She sings to her slightly wayward husband, who has turned up while she is waiting for him, same as Jekyll and Hyde, that she doesn't care about his wild past or other people's opinions of him as long as they have each other, same as Jekyll and Hyde, take me as I am. He then goes on to make choices that she doesn't support. He goes and disappears, leaves her by herself, same as Jekyll and Hyde, and she sings songs about missing him and hoping for the best for him, same as Emma in Jekyll and Hyde. Huge parallels between those characters. And similarly with Jekyll and Hyde, because most of the thing is very serious, when it comes to injecting comedy, it's done quite clumsily, and they just add in something as a joke. They're like, oh, we need a comedy moment here because the whole thing has been too heavy and too dark and too serious. We need like a Thénardier's style moment like in Les Mis, something to give a little bit of relief. Thénardier's works in Les Mis because there's a darkness to the comedy that matches with everything else happening around it. Where we have comedy in Jekyll and Hyde, it's tonally at odds with everything else, because everything else in the show has been so sincere and committed to its sort of ridiculously dramatic proportions, and then you have a song like Murder Murder where they're talking about balls and they don't know how to properly add a suitable comedic moment that matches the tone of the rest of the show. This has the same problem. Les Dennis played a character called Cecil. He was an advisor to the king, I believe. We'll talk about the king in a minute. We'll talk about the king in a minute. But he had a song called Paperwork. It was kind of like a Gilbert and Sullivan-esque patter song, completely out of place, completely at odds with everything else, and it was quite crowd-pleasing, so people enjoyed it and clapped a lot. So people may come for me down in the comment section and say, I know, I loved that number, it was great. As a standalone comedy number, it was quite funny, but it had no business being in that show. It cheapened everything around it. It completely took away from the integrity of what this character would go on to serve in the plot by having had this moment, and it made it harder to take everything, either side of it, seriously. What is the point of everyone singing these intense, serious songs if we're going to get a cheap comedy moment like that? It was bizarre. Musically, there were a handful of odd moments as well. One song started with this droning, repeating note that sounded like the noise a truck makes when it's reversing. And just specific to this production, it had one thing I never enjoy, which is an ensemble that means nothing. This was particularly noticeable during the digging song, when they were just doing some contemporary dance at the front, which was, it was good contemporary choreography. I'm getting a little bit exhausted of contemporary dance that doesn't mean much in shows that, again, very sort of, I could call it Hamilton inspired potentially, but they weren't plotters as far as I could tell. They weren't other characters. They were just an ensemble who represented the idea of what was going on, but they weren't anyone specific. They meant nothing. They were a pointless ensemble just there because it's a musical, so you have an ensemble. I also have to talk about a very, very odd thing that happened in the second act. So after Martha Percy finds out about her husband's involvement in the plans to blow up the Houses of Parliament, something happens. And this is a bit of a spoiler alert for this show that's not necessarily historically obvious, so if you want to skip this and go to the next section, be my guest. Where's Lumiere? Lumiere, that was your moment. So we get a little bit from the narrator at this point about how women are excluded from history, who kind of prompts us to imagine what the women's involvement might have been if people had bothered to write about it. We then have a scene with 6 women on stage, all at microphones. Does that sound familiar? It should. And they debate between themselves whether they should support this vengeful act of terrorism, basically, or whether they should oppose it because of the innocent lives that will be caught in the crossfire. For this particular song, the repeated lyric that they sing a million times is, caught in the crossfire. They're caught in the crossfire. We're caught in the crossfire. Everyone's caught in the crossfire. It's like the Oprah of being caught in the crossfire. But the decision that they come to after much musical deliberation is that these women who feel very excluded from the narrative and feel very powerless and feel very abandoned by history and by their husbands, they decide to write a strongly worded letter. And in doing so, sort of knowingly doom the men involved, their husbands, their brothers, their kinfolk, their community, to death. They doom them to certain death by outing their plans, not specifically, but inadvertently and anonymously, to Parliament and to the monarchy. Which was just such a dumb idea. Now, had they framed it as Martha Percy choosing to do this in the hopes that it would save her husband's life by shutting this whole scheme down and preventing his involvement, that might make more sense. But it's sort of, because of the girl power six lady song that they give them, it seems like they're just doing it out of spite, and so they can feel more involved in everything that's going on, which is a bizarre turn of events. There was a random throwaway line as well where Martha Percy talks about all the women who have been excluded from history and says she's read all their names, she never expected hers to be among them. And if they were excluded from history, I don't know how you could read all their names. I'm just putting that out there. Unless I completely misheard that line and it meant something else, that stuck in my head as an odd moment. So I do want to talk about some of the performances, because for this particular production, they were fantastic. Bradley Jaden, I thought, was at his best here. I loved him at Enjolras. I got exactly the same energy from him in this again, and it did make me think he would be fantastic as Henry Jekyll / Edward Hyde in Jekyll and Hyde. I thought that would be a great role for him. I enjoyed him here. I just wanted his character to be able to sing his feelings a little bit more. I liked Carrie Hope Fletcher opposite him as well. She was very strong. She gets some excellent material to work with. Her performance of The Inevitable is fiery AF. Loved that one. Daniel Boyes is showcasing some of his phenomenal vocals as King James. Now, he gets to play this sort of self-indulgent, campy king character who comes in and sings solo songs amongst everyone plotting around him in a different style, and gets to be an audience highlight and gets to be quite comic and malevolent, but in a fun way. And if that sounds exactly like Hamilton, it's because it is. He is basically King George III reincarnated in a different time period as King James I. It is incredibly similar, in albeit a different musical style. He has a song in the first act, he has another in the second that's kind of like his Rose's turn moment where everything's coming up, monarchy, I guess. But functionally to the plot, he plays a very similar role as King George plays in Hamilton, and he appears for about as much time. Again, very crowd-pleasing, lots for people to enjoy, but when you start to question the overall structure and tone of the piece, it's another one that is potentially a little bit at odds. His material and his comedy is less strikingly unusual against everything else. The biggest issue I had with it is that it did just seem like a Hamilton knockoff. Especially when the king in Hamilton is kind of the part of the show that has resonated the most universally with British audiences, which is hilarious the more I think about it, but we're not talking about that today. Cedric Neal was wonderful with his brilliant vibrato, criminally underused, and Simon Anthony Roden, Hamilton alumnus, having played Aaron Burr, or still plays Aaron Burr. I'm not sure if he's still in the show, but he was Aaron Burr. I've seen him as Aaron Burr, I believe. He played another one of the treasonous conspirators. Can I say treasonous? Is treasonous a word? Someone Google treasonous for me. I have no time. He gave a great performance. Again, I wanted him to have more material so that we really got to know who he was. He made all of his important decisions, and then he sang his big sort of backstory song about his late wife in the second act at a graveyard. I only know that because a graveyard was projected behind him. Otherwise it would have been very unclear what was going on because there was no script and no recitative dialogue. But I did enjoy his performance. So detract as I might from the material of this show, it does seem to have an awful lot of momentum behind it. You know, there have been other British new musicals that have been being workshopped that haven't had nearly as much star power attached to them, or nearly as many opportunities, with West End Live and cast recordings and an entire concert staging at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. This is one of the biggest, grandest venues in London. It is a huge deal that it has made it to this stage for 2 sold-out performances. Clearly the acclaim is there, whether this is because of the show or because of people's interest in the cast and specific members of the cast, I do not know. I could not say. But evidently it has raised a certain amount of interest in the show. As we were leaving the theatre, some people seemed very quiet, other people seemed to have had a really great time and were saying how much they enjoyed it, so that has done its job to a certain extent. There is interest there in the show. Whether it can go straight to a fully staged production in a West End theatre, that I am not so sure about. I don't know if its comparison to similar revolutionary musicals, similar historical musicals, Les Mis, Hamilton, whether that will help it or hinder it and impact the market it is able to access, because if you're going to see that kind of a story, you'd go to Les Mis because it's more of a known concept. You can be surer, especially in a time when we're having a cost of living crisis here in the UK and money is tight. I feel like most families would rather go and see Les Mis because it's more of a known quantity. I could see a smaller scale production of Treason going somewhere like the Charing Cross, but I really would love it if they took some time to workshop the material a little more first. I would love for there to be a script to tie this all together, to explore the characters in more depth, to help put their emotional perspective across so that we understand from the beginning and we are able to get on board with these characters' decisions and purposes and ideals. But those have been some of my thoughts on Treason the Musical at Theatre Royal Drury Lane in concert. If you saw one of these two concert evenings, let me know your thoughts on the show in the comments down below. Also, if there is something else you would like for me to review soon, let me know that in the comments section as well. It may be already coming soon because I have so many videos to film. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my Stager YouTube channel for plenty more content coming very soon about all your favorite shows. Feel free to give me a super thanks down below if you really enjoyed, or you can head over to patreon.com/MickeyJoeTheatre, where you can support me as a Stager content creator and gain access to some exclusive photo and video content. Don't forget to click the link down below to go to showscore.com, sign up for your own account, and start writing reviews of your own. Send them to me afterwards. I would love to read your thoughts. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. What was the treason?
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!